Hi everyone and welcome back. This is Mindy Egan for Hero Arts, and in today's video I'm going to be focusing on some simple Copic coloring using the stamp set Cozy Town. Here's a look at the Cozy Town stamp set. It has a lot of great images to build a little town. You have some houses, trees, little snowdrifts, and there's also a string of lights that you can add to your house as well. This is a look at the hand-drawn Snowflakes stamp set that I'll also be using to create a very subtle background. I'm starting off by loading my background stamp into my MISTI stamping tool, making sure to remove the foam insert since this is a red rubber stamp and already has backing on it. Then I'm loading in a piece of Arctic cardstock. This is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, and I did put a little bit of adhesive on the back of it, so when I flip my MISTI over, it's going to stick down. The way I did this is just ensuring that I'm getting complete coverage over the entire piece of cardstock because I could align it onto that background stamp the way I wanted to. Then I prepped it with an anti-static powder tool, and I'm going to ink up this background stamp with Hero Arts embossing ink. And I'm going to make sure I give this a really good push down using the sleeve on my jacket here sometimes, and then also just giving it a really good push. Now, to make sure that I do have complete coverage, I do like to stamp this twice. Then I'm going to sprinkle on some sparkle embossing powder, and this is a really great powder to use when you want to have a subtle background. I thought the snowflakes went really well with my scene that I wanted to create, but yet didn't take away from it or kind of overtake my images. So off on the side, I do have my heat tool warming up. I want to make sure that that is really nice and hot before coming to my cardstock. Otherwise, if it's not hot enough, you'll blow your sparkle powder around and you won't get as much sparkle to your background. So then I just take it to my cardstock and I'm going to melt that embossing powder. After I have this background heat embossed and everything is melted, here's a close-up look for it. So it's very subtle, really faint. It does take on just a little bit darker of a tone to it, which is why I use the Arctic cardstock because it is really light. And so when I heat embossed it, it doesn't show as much. Next, I'm bringing in some images from the Cozy Town stamp set. I have 3 of the favorite houses off of it and then a group of trees. I lined them up onto some Dove White cardstock from Hero Arts, and I'm going to ink it up with the Intens-ified black ink. I'm going to do just a little bit of Copic coloring, and the Intens-ified black ink is really great for that. So to make sure that I have a really good impression, I am going to stamp them twice. Now I will have all of the colors listed at the top of the screen for you. I have G29 and G07 for my trees. I'm just adding the darker color to one side of the trees and blending out slightly with that lighter color. I'm not going overboard. I just wanted to have a little bit of a contrasting area. And for the houses, I'm using C2 and C0 going from the bottom of the house up. I'm not going to color the whole thing in. For the roof is E74, and for the windows, I did Y08. And I didn't do any shading to the roof. This is just an easy way to get a little bit of dimension to the house without having to color all the small areas. Then I'm going to take the coordinating dies, line them up over the images, hold them in place with some Post-it tape, and run that through my die cut machine. Now I thought this cranberry cardstock would really pop off of my light background. So I loaded a piece into my MISTI stamping tool, and I'm going to stamp this fun Santa sentiment. So I just prep that again with the anti-static powder tool. That just helps so that my embossing powder doesn't go everywhere. It should basically only stick to the area that I'm inking up with the embossing ink. Then I'm going to sprinkle on some white detail embossing powder, tapping off any of that excess that might still be sticking around. And then I'll heat that with my heat tool until that is really nice and melted. Now I'm just going to take this over to my paper trimmer, and I want this to be just a thin strip underneath my houses. I didn't want the red to really overpower my card, but I think it did have a nice contrast to the light background. So I'm just trimming around that sentiment. I did trim my panel down to 3 3/4 by 5 inches, and I lined that with 2 more pieces of white cardstock cut to the same size, and that's just going to add a little bit of dimension to it. And I'm going to add this to a card base. These are the side folded card bases from Hero Arts. I'm attaching this to the front of the card, but it's kind of hard when the card pops up a little bit. So I'm going to bring in a little bit of Post-it tape, just fold that in half, and I'm going to add that to the inside of my card. That's just going to make sure that my card front is not popping up at me, and I can align this a lot better and make sure I have a really nice even margin around my background panel. Once that's done, I can start completing my card. So I'm bringing in my die cut images, arranging them how about I want them to be. But I thought it would be a lot easier to have my sentiment first. So I'm lining that with foam squares on the back, centering that on my card, making sure it's even on each side, and that'll help me align my houses. And I'm going to attach the houses that are in the background with some liquid glue from Hero Arts. And you can see I'm just going about the length of my sentiment. I'm not extending too much further than that. Now the one that's in the middle, I did put a foam square just to pop that up a little bit. To add just a little bit more interest to my background, I'm bringing in the Hero Arts enamel dots, and these are the clear ones. So these are already sticky. All you need to do is remove them from that acetate sheet and place them onto your card. So I'm only doing 3. I like to stick to kind of a visual triangle. So I'm keeping that right around my area, where my images are, and right below my sentiment. I don't want them straight across from each other, so I kind of try and stagger them around. And that will just help draw the attention or keep the attention to the center of the card. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed today's video and it has inspired you to create. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.